A lot of you guys have been asking for Nurgle versus vampire counts, and I just can't quite bring myself to do it yet. We'll get there eventually, but for today, I'm going to be Nurgle up against Vampire Coast instead. Let's take a look at the builds here on this land battle. I've got a Herald on the Palanquin leading the way. Whole bunch of walking Plague Bearers. We've got 4 Plague Bearers through the center, front line of 5 Nurglings. Festering Stooges Regiment are now in the back line. Got some Plague Toads as well, 3 Plague Toads. 3 Poison Warhounds over on the far side, and a couple of Furies here for some mobile attack units to go after those Vampire Coast missiles. Got a couple of deck droppers up in the air, a whole bunch of pistol mobs in the back, and some handguns it looks like mixed in. One single handgun, a couple of Depth Guard polearms, very solid choice in this matchup, and some zombie polearms as well as Silostra leading the way, and a Nurgle Haunter. No lore of vampires, which is definitely a bold choice, but instead going to be relying on that sweet lore of deeps. But my opponent makes a very momentary mistake. Doesn't take long for these bats to get absolutely eaten up by the Furies, and a little bit of a rough situation there. Not taking any of your own bats against the Monogod factions where you can expect Furies. I would pretty much always take Fell Bats in order to protect deck droppers if you're going to be taking them. Just in general, you know, the Fell Bats do trade pretty cost effectively. They're one of the few units in the game that really tends to reliably trade cost effectively. But anyway, Crab's going to get into combat here. Festering Stooges are throwing their Death's Heads at Silostra. Not doing a ton of damage, but definitely doing something. Pretty good burst there. But the Summon Crabs interrupting them, not allowing them to continue to fire. Meanwhile, in the front line, my opponent's doing a good job kind of disrupting my advance. You can see he's counterattacked forward with the Haunter. He's got Silostra also coming forward with the Summon as well, so very much kind of disjointed here. He's not focus firing with his pistol mobs quite yet, but in the back, my Poison Warhound's coming in to roost, perhaps try and get at some of these pistol mobs. Of course, they are very low leadership, not immune to psychology, so Silostra should be able to come in there and tear out them relatively easily. Likewise, Nurgle Haunter with the Hunger can just grind down low-tier Nurglings forever, pretty much. That's just fine. The Furies swoop down onto the ground to help the Nurglings take out some of the zombies here. And like I said, in the back, the Hounds get terrified away pretty quickly. The Toads are going to swing up and around, though, and come for a second wave. Likewise, as the Nurglings start to run out of steam, we've got plenty of Plague Bearers to throw in on that line. And good old Herald can start to slowly meander over to try and take on the Nurgle. Nope, he's just going to switch into the front line there. Try and use some of that Stream of Corruption to blast through these zombies. You can see the damage is super legit. I do think, I'm playing this on the old early access build, I do think that the damage has been nerfed. You can see there that the comparison though to Tide Call, I mean Tide Call's damage just much lower overall, much less efficient. But that little bit of damage from the lore attribute as well, Kiss the Deep, not going to do too much, but it will kind of chip away at some of those Nurgle units in a long game. Definitely would be better to have lore vampires though for the heals. But eventually, some of my Hounds do come back. We're going to try and unify them with the Toads and make a big push onto my opponent's missile line here. But I'm a little bit worried that I don't actually have the tools necessary to kill Silostra. So I'm going to keep the Nurgle Herald on the Palanquin here, since he has pretty good armor-piercing damage. And try and keep him on Silostra as much as possible. But obviously, he's going to get caught up in zombies quite a bit here, a little bit distracted. And it looks like I'm missing the damned Knights Errant summon, which, considering they're going to take magic damage from all the Nurgle demons, is a little bit risky to bring against Monogods, but still can be quite useful. Nice little rear charge there. Heal from me, though. We're going to get a Fleshy Abundance on that Plague Bearer to keep them nice and topped up. Again, here, nice rear charge. Positionally, it's definitely the right play, but as soon as those Plague Bearers turn around and start to attack the Knights Errant, they will start taking pretty significant damage. Yeah, look at that. As soon as Plague Bearers start fighting back, it's pretty one-sided. I mean, I say pretty one-sided. It's okay, but Ghostly Knights aren't long for this world anyway because of their summon timers, so they did manage to get some pretty good work done. If we take a look at their damage value real quick, yeah, like 450 damage value, not too bad, all things considered. And Siloster herself doing a good job reunifying with the Nurgle Haunter. Both of them fighting kind of back-to-back is definitely going to be a good call. Especially if they can manage to get some of the Depth Guard on top of them as well. Like, these two single entities fighting on top of this Depth Guard is going to be very, very tough for me to get through. Right now, both units of Depth Guard have taken very little damage, only lost 3 models on one unit. The other has lost 0 models, so definitely potentially looking very, very rough for me into this late game. Let's see if I'll be able to grind down these elite vampire infantry. Do still have plenty of plague bearers here, and more importantly for me, the festering stooges are likewise also basically untouched. Still full 100 unit models online. They're up to 59 melee defense. Although they don't have the best offensive stats, they can definitely grind against Depth Guard for some time. So let's get in and watch this matchup of elite infantry. True grind, both regenerating. Winds of magic on both sides as well. The Tide Call coming in, not doing nearly as much. But those Depth Guard are now fully surrounded. Plague Bearers and Nurglings on all sides. Same thing over here. Even though Siloster is now unified and fighting on top of them, which is definitely good, there's just so much stuff for Nurgle. So many Toads and Hounds and Nurglings and Plague Bearers all mixed in here. Of course, the Herald as well. It's not a pushover by any means. The Palanquin gives him significantly more mass, and his armor-piercing damage will help get through the 150 armor of Silostra's Crab. Oh man, this is another matchup where you would think that the Nurgle Warriors, the heavily armored Nurgle Warriors, probably change this matchup pretty substantially, but at the same time, maybe not. I mean, certainly it would help you deal with the giant crab in terms of having the armor-piercing Great Weapon Warriors, but they're also going to be unshielded and then quite vulnerable to Vampire Coast missiles, so it's an interesting matchup, definitely. One I do want to explore more in the future with those DLC units. But even without the DLC units, it still seems pretty interesting. I mean, Nurgle, they're not as slow as they used to be. The addition of the Poison Warhounds definitely helps, and of course they'll get access to Marauder Horsemen also in the future, so you will be able to go with a very wide mass mobility Nurgle build, and it could be quite strong here, though. End of the day, the Herald and the Morngul, two disgusting creatures duking it out. The jaw versus the tongue, filled with teeth. Nice overcast, fleshy abundance here just to keep all my troops topped up. Beautiful miscast damage as well, but just trying to continue to grind things down. A Plague Bearer is staying in the fight, you know, the Toad's staying in the fight. 150 armor still on Silostra, like I said, is a lot, but you can only do so much. This grind will go on for some time as the Plague troops just wet noodle crab. So perhaps we'll fast forward a little bit through this endgame. Siloster continues to cast her magic and crab around. The Haunter fights for an alarmingly long time as well, but once the Festering Stooges get into combat and also start just tanking, I mean, it is a true wet noodle contest, but it's eventually going to go in my favor just by sheer weight of HP and numbers. So, not to mention, Herald could also get in here and apply some armor-piercing damage if you really wanted to, but there you go. Well played to my opponent, and hopefully you guys enjoyed watching that one. It's an interesting one. Like I said, even without the DLC, I think the Nurgle has some good tools here, but definitely with the DLC, it should get that much more interesting. Vampire Coast, I wouldn't call this a meta build by any means, but I definitely see the value of the heavy armor units of Coast against Nurgle, especially, and Tzeentch we also saw before. But definitely the crabs, I think, might work reasonably well here. It's tricky to protect ranged units, from what I've found, against the Monogods factions, especially Nurgle now more so with the Hounds and the Furies in tandem. So I might cut a little bit back on missile units here, maybe even take like my own dogs and bats and such to trade against Nurgle's mobility. Since Fellbats trade pretty well against Furies, I'd imagine Direwolves also trade just fine against Chaos Poison Warhounds because of leadership difference. Anyway, in terms of my own army breakdown here, Herald didn't have to do a lot, mostly just here for the heals. Exalted Plague Bearers definitely ground down quite a bit of value there. The Toads also just kind of contributing in many ways. Furies are very cost effective at taking out those deck droppers right out the gates. And it was a tough go for my opponent, but Silostra managed to rack up a huge amount of value, not only grinding in combat herself, but with the summons as well. And then the rest of the army, a little bit of a letdown in terms of the missile units, like I said. Pistol mobs are not too expensive. They can pay for themselves relatively easily. But I would think that the bombers, even against Nurgle, I mean, Nurgle lacking ranged tools, going to be quite slow and vulnerable to the zombie bomber mobs. So I would think maybe that'd be a good way to go here in terms of actually dishing out some pretty substantial DPS, especially against Nurgle infantry. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Hopefully you enjoyed this. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.